Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Judges chapter 20 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to look closely at a profoundly difficult moment in ancient history, a moment where a righteous demand for justice spirals completely out of control into a catastrophic civil war. This chapter really forces us to confront some very dark realities about human nature, unity, and the absolutely devastating cost of conflict among brothers. We'll be walking through these ancient verses very carefully today, unpacking the intense military strategies, the staggeringly high numbers, and the critical spiritual turning points that define this whole tragedy.
Now, as we begin our explainer, we are going to stick strictly to the plain meaning of the text, what we call the peshat. That means we're focusing entirely on understanding the who, what, where, and why of this historical tragedy. We won't be diving into deep symbolic interpretations or Kabbalah or bringing in outside texts. Instead, we're relying strictly on the verses of chapter 20 themselves, taking them chronologically to see exactly how this massive conflict actually unfolded. Because by thoroughly understanding the plain text, we can extract some incredibly powerful, practical truths that still heavily apply to human conflict and justice today. So here is our roadmap. 1. The assembly at Mizpah. 2. Mustering for civil war. 3. 2 days of defeat. 4. The final ambush. 5. Clarifying the conflict. And 6. Lessons and recap. Section 1. The assembly at Mizpah. Let's start right in verse 1. A deeply fractured nation suddenly and quite aggressively comes together as one man before the Lord. The text tells us that from Dan in the far north all the way down to Beersheba in the deep south, and even from the land of Gilead across the Jordan River, a staggering 400,000 soldiers armed with swords arrive at Mizpah. Just take a second to imagine the sheer scale of this gathering. It's massive. The leaders of all the tribes of Israel take their places in the assembly of the people of God. Now, the Benjamites, the tribe whose territory this gathering is literally right next to, they hear that the Israelites have gone up to Mizpah, but notably, they do not join. Instead, the united Israelites demand to know the truth behind the horrific crime that brought them here, asking, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." Verses 4 through 8 give us the grim, deeply unsettling answer. The Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, steps forward to give his grave testimony. He explains that he and his concubine came to Gibeah, a town in the territory of Benjamin, just to spend the night. But during the night, the wicked men of Gibeah surrounded the house, intending to kill him. Instead, they viciously assaulted his concubine, and she died. In a desperate, frankly shocking plea for national attention, the Levite cut her body into pieces and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance. He tells this massive assembly that the men of Gibeah committed a lewd and disgraceful act, and he demands a verdict. Hearing this, all 400,000 people rise up united. They take a solemn oath, saying, "None of us will go home. No, not one of us will return to his house." Look at the strict military logistics outlined in verses 9 to 11. You can't just march an army of 400,000 men on an empty stomach, right? They decide to use lots to direct the campaign against Gibeah, and, crucially, they set up an extensive supply chain, taking 10 men out of every 100, 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000. This specific draft is designed entirely to gather provisions and food for the main fighting force. They know that only when the army is properly supplied will they be able to arrive at Gibeah in Benjamin and give the perpetrators exactly what they deserve for their vileness. And so all the men of Israel get together, completely united against the city. Section 2. Mustering for civil war. Moving into verses 12 through 19, the situation rapidly escalates from a unified demand for justice into a full-blown civil war. Notice the sheer numerical disadvantage the Benjamites just accepted rather than surrendering the guilty men. Before attacking, the tribes of Israel actually follow proper protocol. They send messengers throughout the entire tribe of Benjamin saying, "What about this awful crime? Just surrender those wicked men of Gibeah so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." It's a reasonable request, but the Benjamites make a fateful, disastrous choice. They refuse to listen to their fellow Israelites. Instead of seeking justice, they choose blind tribal loyalty. They muster 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, and added to this are 700 chosen men from Gibeah itself. The text notes a fascinating detail here. These 700 were elite left-handed warriors, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Together, this vastly outnumbered force prepares to face Israel's 400,000 men. Now, even with an overwhelming force, Israel seeks divine guidance for the battle order. Verse 18 tells us they go up to Bethel to inquire of God. They ask a very specific logistical question. "Who of us shall go first to fight against the Benjamites?" The Lord replies that the tribe of Judah shall go first. Confident in their massive numbers, their completely righteous cause, and having received the order of battle from God himself, the Israelites pitch camp near Gibeah the very next morning, fully ready to dispense justice. Section 3, 2 Days of Defeat.
We're about to read verses 20 through 28, which reveal a truly shocking turn of events. We'll see that superior numbers and even a righteous cause absolutely do not guarantee immediate victory. The text maps out a devastating, completely unpredicted string of losses for Israel over 2 consecutive days. On the first day, the men of Israel take up battle positions at Gibeah, but the vastly outnumbered Benjamites come out of the city and violently cut down 22,000 Israelites right there on the battlefield. It's a stunning, horrific defeat. The Israelites encourage one another and take up positions again. They go up and weep before the Lord until evening, asking if they should fight their brothers again. The Lord says, "Go up against them." So on the second day, they draw near again, and for a second time, the Benjamites come out and cut down another 18,000 Israelite swordsmen. In just 2 days, an army of 400,000 has lost 40,000 men to a force a fraction of their size. It's almost unbelievable.
As casualties heavily mount, Israel's spiritual response dramatically intensifies in verses 26 to 28. They finally realize that raw military power is completely failing them. All the Israelites go up to Bethel. This time, notice the shift. They don't just weep, they sit weeping before the Lord, and they fast that entire day until evening. They present burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. The text specifically notes that the Ark of the Covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, was ministering before it. They ask God once more, but this time with far greater humility. Shall we go up again to battle with Benjamin our brother, or not? This deep spiritual realignment finally brings the answer they need. The Lord responds, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand."
Section 4, the final ambush.
Moving through verses 29 through 48, with the divine promise of victory finally secured, we walk through the tactical brilliance and the ultimate, total devastation of the third day of battle. Israel changes their strategy entirely. They no longer rely purely on a massive, clumsy frontal assault. Instead, they set a hidden ambush all around Gibeah. On the third day, the main Israelite force takes up positions just as they had done before. The Benjamites confidently come out to meet them, and here is the brilliant tactical feint. The Israelites allow themselves to be drawn away from the city. The Benjamites start inflicting casualties just like the previous days, killing about 30 Israelite men on the roads. Benjamin aggressively pursues, thinking they are winning again, literally saying, "We are defeating them as before." But the Israelites are deliberately retreating to draw them far into the open field. Meanwhile, 10,000 of Israel's absolute finest men make a heavy frontal attack, while the ambush bursts out of its hiding place to strike the now completely undefended city.
The crucial turning point comes down to a pre-arranged signal. The Israelite main force had arranged with the ambush unit that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city. The ambush makes a sudden dash into Gibeah, spreads out, puts the whole city to the sword, and sets it on fire. As the Benjamites are busy pursuing the retreating Israelites in the open field, this massive column of smoke begins to rise. The Benjamites turn around and see the smoke of their entire city going up into the sky. At that exact moment, the retreating men of Israel suddenly turn back to fight. Absolute panic sets in. The Benjamites are utterly terrified because they realize disaster has finally, inescapably come upon them. The battle immediately turns into a complete rout. The Benjamites flee toward the desert, but they simply cannot escape. The Israelites surround them, aggressively chase them, and overrun them. 18,000 valiant Benjamite fighters fall right there. As they keep fleeing toward the Rock of Rimmon, the Israelites cut down another 5,000 on the roads, and then 2,000 more. In total, 25,100 Benjamite swordsmen fall that day. Out of an entire tribe, only 600 valiant men survive by fleeing to the Rock of Rimmon, where they stay in hiding for 4 months. Meanwhile, the men of Israel go back through the territory of Benjamin, putting all the remaining towns, animals, and everything they find to the sword, setting all the towns on fire.
Section 5, clarifying the conflict. Let's pause our chronological walkthrough for just a second to clarify some of the astonishing numbers and tactical details we just read. Understanding these facts is absolutely vital to grasping the true magnitude of this chapter. If we look at a neutral breakdown of the casualties, it reveals the harrowing cost of this civil war. The massive Israelite army suffered heavily on days 1 and 2, losing 40,000 men in direct combat. Benjamin, on the other hand, suffered almost no losses initially. But on day 3, the tactical ambush completely flips the script. Israel loses only about 30 men during their feigned retreat, while Benjamin loses effectively their entire fighting force of over 25,000 men. Now, to truly understand the Peshat, the simple, plain text of how Benjamin achieved those incredible early victories against such overwhelming odds, we really have to talk about those 700 uniquely skilled slingers from Gibeah. In ancient warfare, slingers were devastatingly effective. They acted a lot like lethal artillery. Because they were left-handed, they could strike from completely unexpected angles against shielded infantry. These highly trained marksmen completely neutralized Israel's clumsy initial frontal attacks. This simple tactical advantage perfectly explains the brutal 40,000 casualties Israel suffered before they finally changed their tactics and humbled themselves before God. The final tally really exposes the horrific mutual destruction of the war. Over 65,000 soldiers died in just 3 days of intense, brutal fighting. The tribe of Benjamin was nearly wiped from the face of history, reduced to a mere 600 men hiding in a rock out in the desert. The cost of failing to enact swift, unified justice without resorting to total war was literally a generational catastrophe for the entire nation. Section 6. Lessons and Recap. Let's distill this tragic chapter into its core events, and most importantly, the practical life lessons we can apply to improve ourselves today. To recap the narrative flow, a righteous demand to address a terrible crime degraded into a devastating civil war. Why did this happen? Well, because the tribe of Benjamin refused to purge the evil from among them. They chose instead to protect their own wicked men rather than seek justice. The Israelites, despite having the moral high ground and massive numbers, suffered 2 days of crushing defeat. It was only when they moved from mere weeping to deep repentance, fasting, and seeking divine guidance at the Ark of the Covenant that they found a tactical path to victory, though it sadly ended in the near-total destruction of Benjamin. So what are the practical takeaways? They're profound. First, protecting evildoers destroys communities. Benjamin's blind loyalty to their own town brought absolute disaster upon their whole tribe. We must never harbor wrongdoing, even among our closest friends. Second, numbers and perceived strength do not guarantee success. Arrogance in our own power often leads to defeat. When we face overwhelming hardship, just like Israel did on those first 2 days, we have to turn to spiritual guidance, humility, and deep self-reflection. And lastly, civil conflict, fighting amongst brothers, always carries a terrible lasting cost that leaves absolutely everyone deeply diminished. So, how will we apply the hard-learned lessons of humility, unity, and uncompromising justice from this ancient text to our own lives today? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.